Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next webinar in the Marketing AI Institute webinar series. I'm here today with Jared Loftus of Rasa.io. Hey, Jared, how's it going? Let's go ahead and get started today. We've still got some people coming in, but Jared, if you want to get us rolling, today's webinar is how to stay top of mind with AI-powered newsletters. And as I mentioned, I'll do some quick introductions. I'm Paul Roetzer, the founder of Marketing AI Institute. And this is Jared. Jared is the COO of Rasa. He's a career entrepreneur in education, apparel, and most recently, artificial intelligence. And he's going to give us a talk today on using AI to power newsletters. So Jared, it's great to be with you.
That's right. Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So before I turn it over to Jared, let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda for today. So we're going to give a quick 2-minute intro into the Institute if you're not familiar with us. And then I'm going to turn over to Jared. He's going to talk for about 25, 30 minutes. We'll take Q&A throughout. If you have any questions or need anything, the chat panel is open. We have a couple people staffing that. So don't hesitate to reach out if you need any support throughout. And you can use the Q&A panel to ask questions, and we'll kind of keep an eye on that. And then we'll use those at the end to talk with Jared. We're going to have one poll question. So throughout, there's going to be a chance for you to kind of interact, and Jared will launch that poll when he gets to that slide. So that's kind of the basics. I think by now, most of us are pretty familiar with Zoom. We're probably all using it every day, all day. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Institute. And our mission, if you're not familiar, we started the Institute in 2016. And the idea was artificial intelligence we knew was growing, but we wanted to figure out how do we make this approachable and actionable to marketers? How do we make it make sense to people? And since that time, the Institute has really started to take off. So it literally started as a blog that me and Mike from my team were starting to write posts a couple times a week. And the idea was, well, let's see if other people are as interested in this as we are. And the answer is that they became. So in the early days, it was pretty much me and Mike writing and reading our own stuff. And then pretty quickly, we started seeing growth. And so today, we actually just, this slide I probably could have updated, we just eclipsed, I think, 22,000 users last month. So we're really starting to see a lot of traction in the industry of people more and more interested in trying to understand and adopt artificial intelligence. And the contact base is growing at about 1,000 to 1,500 new contacts a month. We did have our first conference last July, almost a year ago, last July 15th, I think. And we had 300 attendees from 12 countries. The plan was to do it again this July, but that's obviously not happening right now. But we will be back in July of 2021. And the interesting thing to us is that the database is pretty diverse. So we see almost like a split, a bunch of really big companies that are trying to figure this out, but also a bunch of small to mid-sized businesses. And our approach is to try and make it make sense to all of those audiences. If you're a small business, try and find simple solutions like a smart newsletter that you can use. If you're a bigger business, you may be looking at more complex solutions. And then the industries, it's pretty much every industry you could think of, but our database sort of looks at these main segments as the largest in terms of the number of contacts and subscribers we have. So the overall approach we take is that AI can be your competitive advantage for you and for your company. And the reason is we all realize that it's going to have a massive impact on businesses. And yet most marketers are still really struggling to understand what it is and how to apply it. And so we look at that and say, if you're proactive now, if you go figure out what use cases are and what you can do, you have a massive opportunity to really accelerate your own competitive advantage. And so the common question is, well, how do we actually get started here? And what we advise people is, for most organizations and for most marketers, you're going to be looking for quick win pilot projects. So activities that have very narrowly defined scope and a high probability of success. So what does a use case actually look like? We talk about them as being data-driven, repetitive, and you need to make a prediction. Now, it can be one of these or it can be all of these, but that's really the core things that exist. If you're looking at the things you do every day in email marketing or social or content, if it's data driven, if it's repetitive, and if it requires a prediction to be made about consumer behavior or a consumption pattern or whatever it may be, then you're probably looking at a use case. So if we take a look at email use cases in particular, there are a number of things that you can think about AI applying to. So looking at your contact databases, cleansing and analyzing those, customizing email workflows, improving deliverability, send time at an individual recipient level. Some of these things you would have historically done and they were very manual and very time consuming. Others of these you just don't even think to do because there's no way you could do it. So send time at an individual level. You would never go through your full database and figure out when to send an email to each individual based on the likelihood of when they're going to open. So AI starts opening all of these doors for us. And what Jared's going to now kind of take us through is this idea of how do we actually use AI to power newsletters. So many of us send email newsletters, but we're sending them in bulk. You're sending the same email to 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 contacts, same links, same subject line, same send time. It's all done kind of in that same cohort. You treat everybody as the same person, basically. And AI enables us to move beyond that. And with that, Jared and I will kind of pop off the videos for now, and we'll come back later. And I'm going to let Jared take it from here.
All right. Sounds good, Paul. Thank you. So how to stay top of mind with AI-powered newsletters. The first thing that we're going to go into is understanding our customers and how they interact with us as customers, and then how we're going to try to stay top of mind, the various ways to do that. In particular for us, we're going to talk about newsletters, but first I want you to kind of think about your customer base, right? So if this represents your customer base, let's bring to mind, how often do your customers do business with you? Okay. Everybody's got a different frequency with which people purchase or transact. Here's a couple of examples. I think stats now are saying that almost half of Prime members are purchasing weekly. You do business with your accountant maybe every 12 months when it comes time for tax season and filing your tax returns. Apparently the averages of people buying new cars or buying a car is about every 6 years. And then you've got real estate agents that, transact with someone buying or selling a home. It's almost every 10 years. Okay. So with that in mind, what we're going to talk about later is, okay, well, what do you do in between time? So Amazon doesn't have that hard of a time keeping top of mind because people are doing business with them every week. But for the rest of us, we may not be doing business with someone that frequently. And increasingly in our world where things are moving faster and faster, you've got to fight to stay top of mind and be remembered. A new company may pop up in the time you do transactions. And most of you probably already have experienced this or realize, like, it costs more to attract a new customer than it does to keep an existing one. So keeping your existing customers is very valuable in a number of ways. The studies show that it's about 5 times more expensive to attract a new customer than to keep your existing one. So then the question is like, well, how do you keep those existing customers? So a poll should have just popped up right now. Some of the examples, maybe it's old school with phone calls. I've still got people that want to go out there and make a phone call. Maybe you set a reminder to do that and do the phone call on a regular basis. Maybe you've got some display ads, some retargeting, just so that your brand is out there. It may just be product emails or updates. Like, we've got a new product. Here it is. Here's a new product. Here it is. Like, is it oftentimes just, kind of a, I don't want to say shouting, but you telling them this is what we've got new. We've got other nurture campaigns, and then we've got newsletters. So it looks like Are we show? Yeah. So we're showing the poll results now. You can see the product email updates and then the newsletter. So this is going to be interesting because, you know, we're obviously going to be talking about newsletters, but this newsletter is going to be is basically the opposite of a product update, because a product update is going to be about you, about your brand, about your product, right? And what we're going to do is kind of flip that on its head, where the newsletter that we're proposing is one that's more about the recipient. It's what's relevant and interesting to them. So that's interesting results for where we're going into. So again, call to mind your customers, right? So you've got in mind their buying cycle, right? Well, if we're talking about newsletters, it look like a lot of you are doing that, or you're doing your product updates. Both of those are probably through the form, you know, newsletter, email, but probably the product update is an email as well. So this is probably what that email looks like, right? It's one email to many people, or maybe you have them segmented by type of customer or product that they've bought. But even then, it's still going to be a single email to a lot of people. So before we get into an AI-powered newsletter, I do want to take a minute to talk about like why personalization matters, right? So, because what we're talking about is something that's relevant to the individual, means that it's personalized to them. So, you know, I think we all know at this point that personalization's been shown to generate better open rates. It's, you know, there's a 50% higher open rate when you personalize, okay? There's 87% of customers surveyed say personally relevant branded content positively influences how they feel about a brand. And then 78% report that if a brand does a good job of providing personally relevant content, then it's going to somewhat or significantly increase their intent to purchase. So let's get clear on what personalization means, right? This is not personalization. Hi, Paul, that we have a product to sell you. That's not what I mean by personalization, okay? I'm talking about, you know, almost to the effect of like if you sat down and wrote an individual email to each person, how you would write that. Different people are interested in different things, different products, whatever it may be. And so we're talking about true personalization of the content that's in the email that each person gets. Because 51% of consumers expect companies to anticipate their needs and make relevant suggestions. All right. Well, why is that? Well, it's because we've all gotten used to this. We are mostly customers of, you know, any of these major brands that are doing personalization on a regular basis. So here I am, I've got Amazon, it knows what I've purchased. It's going to make those recommendations. It's, you know, I don't even know how they know I'm a father, but they know that Father's Day is coming up, right? In case I want to buy myself my Father's Day gift. You've got Netflix. Netflix is personalizing what movies they're going to show to me, right? Like I was one of the ones that got sucked into Tiger King. You know, I'm going to own it. I watched it. Well, now they're going to suggest movies and documentaries based on that. If you opened up your own Netflix homepage, you're probably going to see something different, right? Because they've personalized it to you. Same with my music. Obviously, you can see my kids get onto my Spotify. So we've got a little bit of kids bop going there, but it has been personalized to me. There are recommendations of music for me based on what I've listened to and what they know about us. Okay. So I think we can all agree that personalization is key, but the issue is how do we get to that? You know, unless you are Spotify or Netflix or Amazon, you may not have the budget to have all of this fancy technology that allows you to do that kind of personalization. Well, as Paul mentioned earlier, you know, that's where AI comes in. AI is now making that possible for us. And that's what Rasa.io does is allow for that personalization in newsletters. And when we do that, we are able to literally create an individual email per person that aligns with each person's interest and what they find relevant to them. Okay? So, but nobody has the time to sit down and write an individual email. And what I want to do to an individual email to each person, especially if you have a really large list. So what I want to do is show you exactly how that works, how that would work inside the Rasa platform. So let's take the example of the real estate agent. That was the one that was the most extreme on the examples earlier of buying cycles. You've got, almost every 10 years that somebody's buying a house, right? Well, just because you only buy 10 years doesn't mean that you don't have friends that buy houses, or your children might buy a house soon. So the agent staying in touch with this customer is important, right? You can't, nobody's going to make it off of only doing a transaction every 10 years. So, but at the same time, you can't just continue to send a person an email with new home listings, right? Like, you bought a home, you don't need a new home next year or in 2 years. So continuing to send listings doesn't make sense. So let's think through, okay, well, how could you set up something that would go to your customers on a regular basis to keep you top of mind, but it's still relevant to the recipient. It's interesting to them so that they're going to continue to open it, because anybody can come up with an email that they're going to send regularly, but it may not be interesting. So people are going to stop reading it, right? So you need people to continue to read it and have that regular interaction with you. So let's say we put together this newsletter that's going to go to the real estate agent's customers in between these transactions, right? So what are they? So you know that they've bought a home. Well, they don't need a new home because they just bought one, but maybe they need to know about how to decorate that home, or they have some recipes, or interested in recipes of things to cook in this new kitchen, or any number of things around the industry of homes. Okay. And so what we do is identify these other great sources of content. Like I'm a real estate agent. I don't have time to go write a bunch of new blog posts and put out my own content. I need to leverage other people's content that my customers are still going to find interesting. So I'm going to go to these things. You got, Martha Stewart, or Better Homes and Gardens, or World of Interiors, Traditional Home. I'm going to go to these various sources, and I can do that in a number of ways. I can pull it in through the actual like RSS feed. I plug in Martha Stewart's Twitter profile, and anything that she tweets out, I'm going to bring her links in to the platform, so her content's there. Maybe I'm using Slack. Maybe I've got a channel, and anytime I post a link in that channel, however I do that, it's gonna bring this content into the content pool, and it's gonna look kind of like this. So these are a lot of articles. It doesn't matter. I know it's kind of small, but what you can see here is the content comes into the platform. These are the sources that you've deemed as relevant and appropriate for your customers to be seeing, to be receiving from you. You've got the ability to turn any of these articles on and off if you want to. You may say, okay, well, you know what, I don't want to include this one about anthropology selling face masks. Okay, well, you turn that article off. But once we get there, so you see this active 211, there's 211 articles that are available for the AI to choose from in creating this newsletter. And then that's where the AI is going to take over from there. So that's where we're then going to say, okay, Dan and Lisa, two of our customers that we're trying to stay in touch with, the AI is going to go in and look, okay, well, based on Dan and Lisa's interactions with the newsletter in the past, their behavior in this newsletter, what is it that the AI thinks is going to be most interesting for Lisa? what's going to be most interesting for most relevant for Dan. And it's going to take those articles and choose which ones go to which person. And then we're going to literally create an individual email per person. So you can see they both got their newsletter from Moving On Up Realty, keeping in touch with their customers. Dan's going to get these articles that are most interesting to him. Lisa's going to get these articles that are most interesting to her. You can see this one's got more about like the trends in bathrooms and homes. This other one is starting off the newsletter with construction starts and kind of more real estate market in general. Both Lisa and Dan have received something from that agent that keeps the agent top of mind, but is something that is interesting to Dan and Lisa in the meantime, because they're not looking to buy a home. They just bought one or they just sold one, right? So let's look at what happens when we do that. So the brand elevation that we see from this is one, a higher open rate. Okay, so when we have AI knowledge about someone, we're able to make these better recommendations. Somebody sees this email, they actually find it interesting. Maybe they even look forward to it. Okay, so the open rates go up. We see those almost double on the open rates when we have AI knowledge on somebody. And then on the click rates is where we get really excited, because we see almost a 5x increase in the click rate. So what that's telling us is that not only are people interested in opening the email, but we're actually sending them something relevant because they're clicking on it more, right? So they're actually going in deeper to read more. Well, as I explained earlier, that the way the AI works and the way the platform works is that these recommendations are based on the recipient's behavior. And so the more that they're reading, the more that they're engaging, the more that the AI knows about that person. And then the more the AI knows, the better it can make recommendations in the future. And so it kind of snowballs from there. And it's just this like ongoing cycle to be able to make that newsletter better and better for that recipient. Now, the second benefit that I want to talk about is just the automation of it all, right? So in this case, the real estate agent, much like anybody else on this call, is very busy. You've got a lot of things to do on a day-to-day basis. You may not be someone that creates a lot of content yourself. So how do you do this? How do you stay in touch with the customer on a regular basis, but not have it take over a better part of your day, if not the entire day, trying to compile and put together something that your customers are going to find interesting, and then do that on a regular basis? Well, this is, Rosso.io is set up to automate that process. And so you've set up your content, you located your sources that you want to pull content from, then you set your schedule. In this case, we're going to say, okay, well, it's going to go out bi-weekly on Friday mornings at 5:13 a.m. And from there, it's set. There is no, I got to remember to press send or anything like that. It makes that so that it's easy for it to go out consistently and regularly be getting into people's inboxes. Now, the third thing that we want to discuss are the data and the insights of everything we've put together here. So, with email software, it's going to be what you expect with opens and clicks and that kind of reporting, right? But we're going to go a few steps further and show you also the not just the URL of the things that have been clicked, but the actual article title, so you can have a little bit more context. So the articles, the titles, the sources, where they came. We're going to show you the actual sources together, so you can see, like, rolled up, where are they going to the most? Are they going to your blog? Are they going to other places that you've sent them? Like maybe that'd be interesting for you to know that, well, maybe they're really getting a lot from the World Property Journal in this case. Well, that's more of like just real estate news in general. Or are they going to Ideal Home, which means that they're reading about more decorating and trends and how to put their home together and ideas around that. But the other piece of information that we're going to give you that you don't really get from other software is the ability to understand more about that content that we're sending. Because what's happening is the AI is not only making the recommendation of the content for each person, it actually goes in and reads the articles. So using a form of AI, natural language processing, NLP, using NLP, it goes in and reads the content of the article. So not just the metadata, but the actual article itself. And then you see these tags that are here. Those are tags associated with that piece of content, okay? And then we take those tags and they're used throughout the system in a number of ways. It's, it's how the recommendations are formed. It's how we, feed the personalization engine to get better and better, is understanding this content, but also in how we report it. So we're going to take these tags and pair that up with the clickstream data to be able to give you these insights of what people are interested in right now, right? So obviously in this case, it's a newsletter that's coming from a realtor, right? So real estate is kind of obvious that would be at the top of the list and be one of your, more popular topics. But if you start to look down, you get some really interesting insights into what people are reading about that you may not have known. Just because they bought a home from you doesn't mean that you know all of these other things about them. So as you can see, well, work from home, like that's obviously a trending topic right now that people are looking into. But you see that, okay, well, I've got a lot of folks that are into interior design or refinance, or maybe you say, okay, well, wallpaper. Apparently wallpaper is a big deal. Why that may be helpful for you, who knows? But now you know more about the customer. You may be able to take some of this information and then RSA provides this to you. This is on the aggregate that I'm showing you here, but you have the ability to integrate this back into your CRM. So if you're using, say, HubSpot or Salesforce or something that you do other marketing automation with, you could bring this in and have it set up to be looking for things. Maybe somebody is looking more into interior design or updating the home, right? Well, maybe for you that's a buying cue that someone's getting their home ready to sell. So are they going to put their house for sale soon? Maybe there's topics that people that are doing that tend to read about. That may be a great buying signal, or in this case, selling signal that you want to reach out to that person, right? And so you could build out some marketing automation and workflows around that based on some of the topics that come in. So that's the gist of RSA, on how we're able to provide a personalized newsletter to each individual recipient. There's a number of ways that you can go about it. I gave the example of a real estate agent. We're about to open it up for questions and comments. If you've got like a scenario, you're like, well, I'm not sure how that would work. Happy to talk through that. The only other thing that I didn't mention though is, if we go back here, it's like, well, some people, especially if we've got a lot of marketers on the call, are thinking to themselves, well, why would I send anybody to other content? Why am I going to send them to the World Property Journal or Better Homes and Gardens when I want them to go to my site? Well, one of the things, you totally get that, and that's very understandable. But the way that we look at this is, one, they're probably going to that content otherwise, whether they're getting it from you or not. And so why not be that helpful, relevant source for them that is providing them with interesting content, right? But then I would go back to this right here. When you only give them your content, you only know what they see on your site. But doing it in this way, now you at least know that they're interested in these other things or are going to these other places to get that information. And so how beneficial could that be for you or your selling process when you know that about them? And if you only give them your own content, you have you've got a much more limited pool of things to know about them, versus if you open it up to other outside sources and topics that you may not cover yourself. So with that, I think we get into some questions, huh, Paul?
Awesome, Jared. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if you go ahead, the Q&A is open, so go ahead and submit them. I'm actually I can give some context because we're in the process of launching our own smart newsletter, so I can actually ask some questions and give some context there. So before we jump into the questions, just a quick plug for our AI Academy for Marketers. So if you're not familiar, we actually have an entire online learning center that's launching July 15th, dedicated to helping marketers understand and adopt AI. There's going to be 30 plus courses at launch. There's actually about 17 pieces of content live for early access right now. We're going to have 5 certificate programs, a private online community that's all really built around helping people understand what AI is, pilot it, and scale it in their organizations. Pricing goes up at the end of the month, so that's my quick plug for Academy. And with that, I'm going to jump into questions. And again, so having gone through this process or in the midst of going through it ourselves, the first thing I want to ask you, Jared, is I think AI is so abstract to a lot of people that they worry that getting started is going to be overly complex. Talk to us about the onboarding process. So you kind of walked us through some examples, but like what goes into actually launching an AI-powered newsletter to the user?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we get a lot of people that come to us and go, oh, well, they assume that AI is all about big data, right? And so that means that they need to come to us with clean, pristine, like perfect data from their CRM. I have not experienced that from anyone. I don't know anyone that has perfect data, right? So that, we've intentionally made that possible so that that's not the bar that you have to meet. Really, to get started, all you need is an email list. You've got the list of people that you want to email, and then an understanding of what is it that you're wanting to set up. In the case of the real estate agent, the sources, those things around home and garden and just real estate. But maybe you have a bicycle shop, right? And so you're including things like the outdoors or things around physical fitness, things like that. So if you know who your customers are, like their email addresses, and then about them as far as like what they're interested or what it is that you want to be presenting in your newsletter, then that's all it takes to get started. We've made it so that, we've got a free plan to get started that'll allow you to send up to 10,000 messages a month. So that's about 2,500 people getting an email weekly. And you go in and you tell the system which sources you want to pull from, or Twitter profiles, or however you want to set that content up. We've got some templates that you can choose from and then customize, and then you set your schedule. And it's really as basic as that. And at the same time, we've also got some great support as far as to reach out to us if you've got any questions, and happy to help you walk you through the system, just because we know it is a little bit of a different way of doing email. And so we understand that people have questions.
And then what's the management process like? So, again, I think AI people sometimes misperceive that it's this 0 to 5, like we're going to go from all human all the time to all AI, and we're not going to have to touch any of this ourselves. what is like the first month or two like when you actually start running this? What are some of the daily activities, or weekly, if you're sending a weekly, that you're still doing to kind of manage and train the system?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe in the on the front end, you're going to want to be looking at it more often just because it's new and you're getting used to it. But you'll want to be checking on the content. So what kind of content are you pulling in? And the articles, looking at the upcoming content that you've got that will be distributed, and determining if those articles look good or not. If you're going in there each week, let's say you send a weekly newsletter, if you're going in there each week and the content looks good and you become more comfortable with it, we'll see people eventually get to a point where they kind of just let it go. If you see that it needs changes, then you may play with the filters, and we have the ability to say, okay, we'll bring in everything from Better Homes and Gardens, but don't bring anything around mortgages, or don't bring anything around pest control. I don't know, but you can filter that down to get it to what you want. But even then, I mean, almost across the board, anyone that's used to sending a newsletter tells us that it's a lot easier of a process, and they're spending much less time on getting it out the door. In some cases, no time at all, because it's completely automated if they've got it set up the way they want.
And if you're also creating your own original content that's going to be fed into this, if I remember correctly, you can actually prioritize your own content, right? So that your blog posts or your shares will show up and select, either you want to make sure the most important blog post goes to everybody, and you can actually kind of set those sort of things.
Absolutely. Yes. We have this concept of like boosting content. So
Okay.
your article comes in, you want that, and you just, click a button to say, this is the most important. So that's going to tell us to put it at the top, and then the bottom of that will get supplemented with external content.
Okay. And
you really have as much. I like to tell people that you have as much control as you want. It can be as automated or as manual of a process as you want to make it.
We do have some questions rolling. So, okay, we've got one that says, I've compiled over 500 sources of RSS feeds with content relevant to my user base. Can I add these specific RSS feeds into the RSS system? And I'll extend on it. Is there a really efficient way to do it? Is there like a CSV upload, or like, how does that work?
So we don't necessarily have, well, talk to us. If you've got 500, that's a lot. There's some ways that we can make that happen. It's not going to be on the user side. But basically, with an RSS feed, that's kind of the easiest way to go about it, is if you can give us that structured data in that format of an RSS feed. So it's just the RSS feed URL. So, pr2020.com/feed, if you will. That would be that's all that we would need. So bringing that in, 500 may be too much. At some point there is a little bit of an overload. So now we're talking about, you want to send on average, we've got about 10 articles in each newsletter. If you fill the platform with 2,000 articles a week, it can narrow down to 10. It's just
right.
that's a lot more to choose from. It may be difficult for you to curate on your end. So, but it is possible.
Yeah, it's a good starting point. I mean, it's always easier to filter back.
I was going to say, you're starting from a much easier starting point than somebody going from scratch. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things we get to is like, well, what kind of content? If you can answer that question from the get-go, then you're good.
All right, cool. All right, so we got another one that says, what about marketing firms who create newsletters for multiple clients? Does Rasa.io have an option to serve multiple clients? I know you guys are working on some partner program stuff. Is there anything like that, like a partner portal or agency portal?
Yeah, absolutely. So this particular Rick, actually, I believe I just saw his name come through yesterday as a new customer. And I believe I saw a question about, it's kind of how you operate that in the dashboard. So like, is it multiple logins or is it one single login? And so if that, I'm kind of inferring some things, but if that's kind of what you're looking at, then yes, like you have the ability to set up multiple newsletters and not have to jump around with a different login for each one. So you can manage multiple within that. But in addition to that, as Paul mentioned, we do have a partner program on the marketing agency side. So happy to talk more about that.
What about, again, when we think about starting with AI, and you'd referenced this earlier, there's this assumption you need a ton of data or 100,000 subscribers before you can do anything with it. Are there any limitations to the number of subscribers or people you're going to be emailing to use the AI technology? Or is it, I mean, you could have 10 and it could technically learn the preferences of 10.
As big of a list or as small of a list. At first, what we thought was that this only worked for big email lists. And what we found over time is that actually it's not the size of the list, it's the frequency and engagement of the list. So, we also wouldn't say like you shouldn't just send the email monthly or quarterly. That's too infrequent. The AI doesn't have any time to learn, right? But if you're sending it regularly, it's personalized to the individual. So the size of the list isn't really a factor in that, because it's going to personalize to that person, not to the group.
And talk about that personalization for a second, because we're all familiar with Netflix or Spotify. Like, you log in and it's going to surface trending songs or movies. It's going to surface most popular, because it's trying to learn you and it's trying to understand what you're actually likely to click on. And then those personalization machine learning algorithms start to truly learn your individual behavior. So you start with a database of, say, 10,000 subscribers, and we launched Rasa.io. How many times does it need to be opened or engaged with it, each user, before it actually starts personalizing the links they're going to get?
Yeah, so I mean, we can see in the data where from that first interaction, for that first point where we know something, then we can start to make a recommendation off of that. The more interactions we have, the better those recommendations are. But even that first recommendation off of something we know is better than a recommendation off of something we don't know. So a brand new list, there's no engagement. It's all kind of a random assortment. And then we're trying to get them to interact and engage from there. So it's more about how quickly you can get people to engage on how fast that would work.
So one here is, how do I add my own article to the newsletter? I think we touched on that one. You just add that feed. And then
it's a feed or a specific URL. You could take that exact URL of the article and put it in and go from there.
Okay, cool. Will a real estate agent, as an example, be able to brand it and make it personalized?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's going to be your branding, your colors, your domain coming from your domain. In this example, at movingonup.com kind of thing. Like it is your email.
Okay. And we had the question about the free trial, which I think you answered. Was it 10,000?
10,000 messages. Yeah. So it really, that's 2,500 a week, or that's 5,000 biweekly, that kind of thing.
All right. So we have one about if you have limited content resource. So if you're in an industry where maybe there's only 2 or 3, one trade pub and maybe only a few blogs, like not a big digital transformation industry. What are your thoughts there on where the content inspiration can come from, where the sources may come from to curate?
Yeah, I would, whoever asked that.
Michelle, I think we had.
If you could tell us what industry, because I always love playing this game, because people are like, oh, there's nothing out there. And it's like, well, actually there probably is, once you start to think about it. So I think that's where you understand your industry, but what are the things around?
Event technology was her answer. Event technology.
Event technology. Oh, so if you've got a event technology, I mean, like, think about all of the content out there in the world where people are talking about like gathering of people, and what does that look like in today's world? What are the things around events? So your business is event technology, right? But your recipients are the people that are on your list aren't solely thinking about event technology. They're thinking about gathering people for events. What are the things that they need or would be finding relevant, right? And so you kind of do this thing where you look at your industry and then you kind of go around it where, well, is it the, you know, content about venues, content about locations and cities, content about new meeting styles, content about how to better engage people. There's all of these things around that. So technology is the particular tool, but the people on your list are going to find a lot of things outside of that still to be relevant. And that's the whole purpose, right? Like, how often do they buy event technology? It's not something they buy every day or every month, maybe even every year. But now if you could give them something that kind of helps them out in their day-to-day business, but not be super salesy, then hopefully when it does come time for them to re-up or purchase something, you've been interacting with them regularly, and now they're more likely to come to you.
It's almost like any content strategy where you're trying to think about who are my buyers and what are their pain points and questions all the time, not just when they're buying event technology software, but what else are they thinking about? What are the questions they have? And then where would they go to find those answers? And that can help you. And it might be a Twitter feed of influencers. It might be blogs. It might be, you know, trade industry pubs. So yeah, there's lots of options there.
We have not encountered anyone yet that, like, oh, we couldn't find you any, you know, we've worked with some really, really niche organizations and groups.
So I saw something, I just glanced over the chat panel too. So one, I've seen a couple, yes, this session is being recorded. The video will be available, as will the deck. So that'll all be, it should be sent tomorrow. But the question that also came into the chat was, is there opportunity for them to be sponsored? And this is a great question. This is actually one of the things we talked to you guys about very early on is, you know, we have sponsors of our newsletters. We run text ads. So the Institute, we run a newsletter every week, and then we have 2 text ad sponsors. Can you inject that? So if you're an association, or if you're one of these people like that, can you do that?
Yeah, so you can absolutely do that. I think I saw a follow-up question of, like, you know, can this person get their content into someone else's newsletter? Yeah. That's going to be on the sender. Like, I wouldn't say, like, Ross is not a marketplace of being able to get your content into other people's newsletters. But as the sender of the newsletter, you always have the ability to go to a sponsor or have one sponsor your newsletter and put in their content manually so that everybody sees that.
Yeah. Somebody asked, I think I've seen this a couple of times, about the permission to curate. And that would be, no, I mean, from a copyright perspective, there's no issues with curation. That's content curation has, you know, been around for 10 plus years, that idea of it, and using AI to curate. In this case, distributing. If you think about like a Business Insider as an example of like an entire media company that was originally built around this idea of content curation and featuring the best stuff. And then you want to, and I don't know the exact technical, but like I was thinking about when I wrote my books, you could excerpt like 100 to 150 words at most, as long as you cite the original source and then link back to them. Right. You're not housing their content. You're not taking their content. In fact, you're driving people to their content.
Right. That's what I was just about to say is you know, so we're not trying to frame it or co-opt it or make it look like it's the sender's content. It's got, you know, the source, the title, the description of the article. And when you click on that, it goes to that page. So you're actually driving traffic to that content. And nobody's complaining about us sending them traffic.
I saw one here about integration. So why don't you talk for a moment about, you know, say I'm a HubSpot user, I'm a Salesforce user, I'm, you know, Oracle, whatever it may be. And I have my CRM system where I track my, you know, user behavior and what they do on the site, and what they do with my emails. How do you guys think about analytics data, and how do you think about ways to maybe integrate those systems so that the data can kind of coexist?
Yeah, so right now on the plans that we have on the website, like there are some enterprise level things where we would start to talk about the data you have and bringing it in to impact the recommendations that we make in the future, right? So on the self-service, the plans that you see on the site, that's taking into account the information around behavior in the newsletter itself. Okay. And so I want to distinguish between that data that you have that comes into us to make recommendations that's not really on the self-service side. However, the data that we're able to derive from the actual newsletters and getting that back to you, that's going to happen through integrations. And so the integration of these people live in your CRM, so that therefore they need to receive your newsletter, that's a simple one. That's a straightforward integration. The piece that is possible, we just have to work through that with you, is getting the data from our system to yours for you to then take additional steps. So maybe you put in some marketing workflows around a certain topic. Is, you know, an individual gets to a certain topic of interest, and from that point we want to automate a series of emails to tell them about a webinar that we have or a product that we've got. So that's where the HubSpot and the Salesforce integrations are going to come in.
Any concerns around GDPR? We had a question around that. Anything out of the ordinary other than, hey, as long as they're opting in, they're opting in?
Yeah, I mean, the opt-in, opt-out, the ability to, you know, the right to be forgotten, we've got all that baked into the system, fully GDPR compliant, and have the data processing agreements for those clients that are going to need that.
Do you have an affiliate program?
We do have an affiliate program, yes.
Does it work internationally? In specific Mexico?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Right now, you know, it just the limitations of where we are, in that the AI, specifically the natural language processing that we're using, is only working in English at the moment. It is not bilingual into other languages yet. It's something that we're definitely working on, but right now it's limited to English.
Oh, this is actually one I had. Titles. So what picks the subject line for the email? So you have, you know, let's say I've got my 50 sources in there. I leave 30 of them as, hey, AI, pull from any of these 30 sources to send your emails this time. How does it decide what the subject line is going to be?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that you can handle that. It could be manual, where you decide what subject line is, just like if you're writing any other email. So you can manually choose that subject line, or and what we recommend, what we use for our own, is that you so because the AI is making this recommendation of content per recipient, it has the notion of the top recommended article for that person. So this is the article that Paul is going to find the most interesting, right? And so what we could do is set it up to take the title of that most relevant article for the recipient and use it as the subject line. And so that, therefore, you know, you've got your send name and the subject line as like the first thing they see, right? So now the idea is that hopefully they're seeing something that would be more likely to be interesting to them, which would get them to open.
Cool. There was one here, maybe we'll do one or two more here. It's about Slack. So you had mentioned Slack, I know, as a possible feed. So the trend to move from emailing to channels like Slack, probably, you know, based on different industries. How does Rasa give us an opportunity to, you know, connect with customers? So talk about, you know, just how Slack and Rasa.io, you know, work together, so, if there's any connection there.
Well, so we've got the ability to do like using Zapier, some various tools of taking Slack and bringing it into Rasa, right? So you post a URL in Slack in a particular channel, and it allows you to that article now shows up in the Rasa platform. Rasa to Slack is a little different. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still making content recommendations per individual. So in a channel that's assuming that's a channel of multiple individuals, that gets to be that'd be the same as like me putting a tweet out on Twitter. I can't customize which tweet people see. Like, they just see what I put out, and everybody sees that. So we've definitely got our eyes on Slack. We see a lot of interesting things happening in Slack. So the ability to more relevantly distribute content to the right people at the right time through that method is absolutely something we're paying attention to, but not something that I've got an answer for today. Because the other, in a similar way, you still see people using SMS, like texting.
Right.
for marketing. And so, possibly an idea of that top recommended article. So I'm not going to text you a newsletter, but possibly the ability to say, okay, well, what if we could text the top recommended article? And then that was kind of a segue into, and then you can find more in your newsletter today, that kind of thing.
You can almost see this, see the same work almost working in app too, or you could just present things and then recommend.
Yep, exactly.
What's the pricing model? Remind me of the pricing model. What do you guys do based on number of sends per month, or how does it actually work?
So it's based on number of messages per month. There's 3 different levers. You've got the messages per month. So 0 to 10,000 is free. After that, it just scales up from there. The first plan that we have starts at $29. That removes the RSA branding, allows you to send over 10,000, that kind of thing. And then it just scales up per message from there. If you go to rasa.io/pricing, you'll see the calculator of like just a sliding scale. And then so messages is the first lever. The number of integrations, how many things are you integrating with?
Okay.
And then the number of sources you bring in. Each different plan allows you a certain number of sources.
All right. Well, we're getting close. Any final thoughts you want to share with anybody before we head off, or any common questions you normally get that we didn't ask this time?
Here's an interesting that just came in of like, who's your main competitor? We don't, I wish we had one. If we had a competitor, that's somebody else that's talking about this idea of personalized emails. Just the concept itself is kind of new to the market, right? So we don't have a true competitor. There's plenty of people that do email, right? Like HubSpot does email, MailChimp, SendGrid, Constant Contact. There's plenty of people that do email, but we haven't found anyone that does the personalization of content in the way that we're talking about. You've got a few things around product customization. You looked at this product, you might like this, but not around like written content, non-product.
Yeah, and there are a lot of, again, like when you think about AI, and Jared, if you could post your email address, someone asked to be able to reach out to you. I know it's on that question slide, but it's just jared.loftus@rasa.io. If you think about those use cases we showed at the beginning, there are companies that do individual things. Like Phrasey is a company we're really familiar with that does email subject lines. That's like specifically the main feature of what they're capable of doing. If you want to get into send time personalization, there's tools like 7 Cents that specifically do send time personalization. If you want to get into like this level of recommendation, these things are woven in, like you're probably looking at custom building something like on an AWS or Google. You're going and getting machine learning engineers who know how to build machine learning models to do predictive, recommendations. It's, to your point, like you're working with a smaller market because there isn't that much awareness of the ability to do this stuff. But there are other players, like there's other companies doing things. But again, AI is built to do specific tasks. And so you need tech companies that have picked a use case like this and decided we're going to build AI to do that specific use case. And that's kind of where you guys have sort of fallen in this thing. Like you're the ones I'm aware of that do this exact use case bundled in this way. There are other email providers that are AI powered to do specific use cases within email.
Absolutely. And then as it gets more and more, we're working on trying to have those partnerships for the send time optimization and the other things that you mentioned. Yeah. But you're right. That's kind of, in the early days of AI, you've got very narrow applications. We tried to make it broad enough to, everybody's doing email for the most part. So we feel like it's something that it allows you to get into AI and start to better understand that, but in a low lift enough way that it's not intimidating to get started.
Yeah, and that to go back to the how to get started, that's what we talked about at the beginning. It's if you're just, this is going to be your first pilot project in AI, find something you can activate within 30 days and within 90 days, get a sense of if it's working or not. You don't want your first AI pilot project be $100,000, 6-month lift that didn't work and you don't realize it until 6 months later. And all of a sudden you lose executive support to take these steps. You want to pick individual narrow projects that you can kind of quickly learn, did it work? Because you're gonna try a bunch of stuff that doesn't work,
Right.
and you need these kind of really cool, simple pilot projects to get you rolling. So we're coming up on the end of the hour. I'm just really appreciate, Jared, again, everybody on the call. The recording and the deck will be made available. We'll email you hopefully tomorrow. But thanks again, Joe. Really appreciate your time and going through all this.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. Thanks everybody that joined today. And you've got my email address here. Reach out and hopefully hear from you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.